The fluorescent lights in Conference Room B buzzed with the harsh persistence of hornets, a sound that pressed into the silence like a verdict waiting to be read. Staff Sergeant Maria Santos straightened the front of her dress uniform and forced her boots to strike cleanly against the polished concrete. In her hands was the manila folder that held everything she had built her career upon: perfect marksmanship scores, combat commendations, psychological evaluations, and glowing recommendations from 3 commanding officers. She snapped to attention before the metal table where 5 officers sat like judges. Colonel Hayes did not raise his eyes at first. His pen scratched across the margin of another file as if she were simply another form to process. When he finally looked up, his expression held the cold detachment of someone appraising a defective part. To his left, Major Thompson smirked faintly, his posture too relaxed for the gravity of the evaluation. Captain Williams shuffled through her file with an air of disinterest, pages sliding under his fingers without focus, while Lieutenant Colonel Brooks stared at the wall beyond her shoulder as though she were transparent. "Your shooting scores are adequate," Hayes said, leaning back with authority weighted in every syllable. The single word struck Maria like a blow. Adequate. She had posted the highest marksmanship scores in her battalion's history, had hit targets at 800 meters in crosswinds that sent others home defeated, yet the word erased all of it, flattening excellence into mediocrity. "The program requires more than shooting ability," Thompson cut in. His tone made clear that her evaluation had already been decided. "A specific temperament, one you do not possess." Maria kept her jaw tight, her voice even. "Sir, my psychological evaluations." "We've reviewed your file," Hayes interrupted, stamping a red "denied" across the folder with deliberate force. The sound echoed sharp against the walls, final and cruel. "You're reassigned to convoy logistics, effective immediately." As she turned to leave, she caught Hayes's muttered words to Thompson Morrison's boy starts next month. A soldier with the right instincts. She knew the name Jake Morrison, a private who had failed twice before passing his evaluation, the son of a general with the right golf partners. Maria's boots echoed down the corridor, spine rigid, expression calm. Inside, however, a fire smoldered beneath the humiliation. They had dismissed her once. She would make certain they never did again. The Afghan sun hammered the convoy as it wound through a mountain pass where rocky ridges loomed like ancient sentinels. Dust swirled around the 4 Humvees, engines growling against the incline. Inside the second vehicle, Maria adjusted her body armor and kept her M4 close, eyes scanning the slopes. 3 weeks into her logistics assignment, and she had already learned that routine supply run meant pray you make it back. Sergeant Williams drove beside her, weathered hands, steady on the wheel, but his warning lingered. Too quiet. Always too quiet. The silence broke with a roar. An IED detonated beneath the lead truck, the blast flipping it into the air like a toy before slamming it down in flames. The shockwave spiderwebbed Maria's windshield, throwing her hard against the frame. Her ears rang, her vision blurring. William slumped forward, blood streaking from his temple, his weight dragging the wheel toward the cliff edge. Gravel sprayed into open space. Maria lunged, seizing the wheel and wrenching it left. Tires screamed as the Humvee skidded to a halt, mere feet from a 100-foot drop. Gunfire followed instantly, echoing off stone walls. Bullets sparked against armor and rock, the convoy trapped in a kill box. Maria shoved her door open, heart pounding, as voices screamed over the radio. The lead truck was a burning ruin, yet through shattered glass, she heard a cry. Specialist Davis, pinned beneath twisted metal, his voice ragged and terrified. She sprinted across open ground, rounds cracking past her boots. The heat from the wreck seared her skin as she yanked at the rear door. Metal burned her palms even through fabric. She wrapped her jacket and pulled with all her strength, the frame groaning but unmoving. Davis's voice faltered, drowning under the roar of fire. Instinct pulled her gaze upward. A flash. Eastern ridge. Between 2 boulders. 400 meters out. A sniper. Deliberate and unhurried, sighting in. Maria's chest tightened. Her M4 was useless at that range. No optics, no chance against a concealed marksman. She raised the radio with shaking hands. Negative effective range. The words tasted like ash. The next shot was final. Davis went silent. The burning Humvee collapsed inward, flames consuming what remained. Maria pressed her back against the wreckage, powerless rage tearing through her as bullets chipped stone around her. She had seen the threat. She had named the range, but stripped of the tools she had earned. All she could do was watch another soldier die. The chapel at Forward Operating Base Viper was nothing more than a converted shipping container with a wooden cross nailed to one wall, but it carried the weight of grief. 30 soldiers stood in silence, faces lit by the dull glow of a single fluorescent strip buzzing overhead. At the center rested the boots, rifle, and helmet of Specialist Davis. A folded flag draped the table beneath them, its colors muted by smoke haze filtering through the open door. The air carried a faint tang of diesel, the smell of engines and war that clung to everything. Maria sat rigid in a folding chair, hands knotted in her lap, guilt pressing down with a weight heavier than her body armor. She could still hear Davis's voice crying from the wreck, still see the muzzle flash across the ridge. 400 meters her range estimate had been exact. The skills she possessed had been useless without the rifle they had refused her. She stared at the empty boots until her vision blurred. A gravel-rough voice broke the silence behind her. You called the distance before anyone else. Dead on. She turned to see a man in worn khaki pants and a faded polo, his hair silver, his face carved by years of sun and dust. His eyes were pale and steady, the kind that missed nothing. His handshake, when offered, was like gripping stone, calluses set deep into the skin. James Patterson, he said, though most knew him only by the name whispered with reverence. Ghost, the sniper whose record kills filled manuals she had studied in secret. Maria found her voice low and strained. Didn't matter. I couldn't stop him. Ghost studied the memorial for a long beat. You had the eye, the nerves, and the judgment. They'll never admit it, but I will. You're built for this. He leaned closer, lowering his tone. Meet me tomorrow. 0500, old ammo bunker. Bring whatever rifle you can. If you want the truth of this craft, I'll teach you. Off the books. No one needs to know. Hope flickered through her grief. For the first time since the rejection, someone had seen her. The mornings belonged to Ghost. Before the first hint of light touched the mountains, Maria walked the gravel path toward the abandoned ammunition bunker. Dew slicked the concrete walls, cold seeping into her boots as she set her pack down. Ghost waited like a statue, carved from the dark, battered watch glinting as he checked the second hand. 3 minutes early, he muttered, better. Training began without ceremony. He corrected her posture with a single touch, gravel voice sharp when her elbows flared or her cheek weld slipped. She lay prone on a mat, the ground damp beneath her, rifle balanced against sandbags, grass bent in faint arcs. Dust swirls rose where wind curled. Ghost forced her to read them before every shot. The wind tells you what the bullet already knows, he said. Hours blurred into repetition. Hundreds of rounds snapped downrange toward duct-taped silhouettes nailed against rusting barrels. Her hands blistered, shoulders ached, and each squeeze of the trigger sent pain lancing through muscles she had never trained. Still, she worked, reloading with practiced economy, refusing to quit. Between strings of fire, she filled her notebook with dope charts and margin notes, pages smudged with graphite and sweat. Breathing became ritual. Ghost pressed her shoulder when it quickened, forcing her to wait for the natural pause at the bottom of her lungs. Your heartbeat is the metronome. Make it your ally. She learned to count the rhythm, to let the reticle settle in time with the pulse. By sunrise, she was exhausted, arms trembling as she recorded final corrections. Ghost crouched beside her, eyes pale and unreadable. Shooting is half the job, he said. knowing when not to shoot. That's the rest. A sniper survives by patience. Maria closed her notebook, her body screaming, but her mind steadier than it had ever been. The day's labor would earn no recognition, no commendation, but she felt the shape of growth etched in every ache. Beneath the silence and repetition, she was becoming something new. The rain had eased into a mist by the time the search team reached the clearing. Rocks glistened dark under the gray sky, their surfaces slick as bone. At first glance, it looked like the site of a skirmish. Then the soldiers realized the pattern. 6 American bodies lay in a rough circle, rifles stacked in the center as if offered in some cruel ritual. Helmets had been set beside them, each detail deliberate. The clearing was silent but for the drip of water from leaves. Silence so heavy, it pressed against the ears. Maria's boots sank into the wet soil as she stepped closer. She knelt beside Sergeant Martinez, noting the single hole drilled perfectly through his chest plate. Another body had the same wound through the forehead. Entry clean, no wasted rounds. She traced the angles with her eyes, marking positions on instinct. These shots had not come from one place. They were staggered, fired from shifting points along the ridge. The shooter had moved between kills, never rushed, never missing. Head, chest. Repeat, Maria murmured, her voice tight but even, every placement exact. She reached for a spent casing left on a flat stone. More lined the surface, arranged neatly in a row. Not forgotten, displayed. Behind her, the younger soldiers muttered curses, their faces pale. One crossed himself, unable to look again at the circle. Maria forced herself to keep studying. She measured distance by sightline, felt the slope in her bones. This was not an ambush. It was a message. Boot steps crunched behind her. Ghost emerged from the tree line, civilian clothes damp, his eyes scanning without expression. He crouched beside her, picking up one of the casings with calloused fingers. His jaw tightened. "The Phantom," he said quietly, almost to himself. The name slid through the squad like a chill. Some had heard the stories, an unseen marksman who had haunted the region for months, racking kill after kill with impossible precision. Ghost's tone carried no exaggeration. He knew the work. Maria rose slowly, the mist clinging to her hair, her stomach heavy with dread. The geometry of the deaths was undeniable. This was not random brutality. It was a hunter shaping the battlefield, one step ahead, making art out of slaughter. She realized then she was staring at a mirror of the path she had chosen. The attack came before dawn, when the compound was still wrapped in uneasy quiet. The first rocket struck the communications tower, shattering steel and glass in a burst of sparks. The second slammed into the motor pool, sending flames rolling skyward and igniting fuel drums in a chain of explosions that lit the base in a savage glow. Within seconds, tracer fire arced over the walls, red streaks clawing at the night. Chaos erupted. Medics sprinted with stretchers, voices shouting through smoke. Soldiers scrambled for positions, rifles clattering against sandbags. Radios screamed with overlapping calls as officers tried to rally units along the north wall. Then came the crack of a high-powered rifle. Collins, one of the base's 2 snipers, collapsed on the tower, a dark shape tumbling against twisted railings. 30 seconds later, Hayes, the second marksman, fell with a round through the chest as he tried to reposition. "We have no overwatch," a voice howled through comms. The words repeated by others until panic spread. Blind. The base was blind. Maria crouched inside the shattered armory, ears ringing from the concussive blasts. The air reeked of burning diesel, acrid smoke curling through every doorway. Around her, soldiers fought to pull weapons from broken racks, hands shaking as they stuffed magazines into trembling rifles. Another rocket slammed against the outer wall, showering the room with dust. She pressed against the window frame, forcing herself to steady. Across the ridges, muzzle flashes blinked like cruel stars, each one deliberate, each round cutting down anyone who exposed themselves. She measured angles, traced the rhythm of the shots. Ghost's voice whispered in memory. The battlefield belongs to the one who sees. She followed the flashes, marking distance and slope until the Phantom's perch revealed itself a position with perfect lines of fire and multiple escape routes. Her hand closed around the grip of an M24 leaning against the rack, the weapon cold and heavy with promise. Around her, the defenders were faltering, pinned by a predator they could not reach. Maria exhaled, heart steady, the decision forming with ruthless clarity. Unless she took the rifle, unless she broke every rule that had bound her, the base would fall. Maria climbed the communications tower hand over hand, metal rungs slick with smoke and grit. The higher she went, the sharper the chaos below became. Tracer lines lashing across the compound, voices breaking into static over the net. When she reached the platform, the first thing she saw was Collins's body slumped against a bank of shattered equipment. Blood pooled beneath him, rifle still clutched in lifeless fingers. She eased him aside with a quiet breath, then slid into position behind the low barrier. The air reeked of oil and burned wiring, the tower shuddering from distant impacts. Through her scope the valley stretched open, stark in the glow of muzzle fire. 800 meters away, the Phantom's position blinked with cruel rhythm, each shot measured, each impact precise. The first round came within seconds, striking sparks inches from her cheek. She rolled instinctively to the opposite corner, heart hammering in her ears, ghosts training forcing her to breathe, to measure, to steady. Her reticle found shapes moving below insurgents advancing under his protection. She knew his logic. Keep the base pinned. Cover the assault. Instead of trading fire with him directly, she shifted her aim and squeezed off a round at an RPG gunner breaking cover. The man spun down hard, weapon tumbling away. A ripple of confusion moved through the attackers. The Phantom answered instantly, his next shot slicing through the space she had vacated seconds before. Maria rolled again, firing from a new angle, cutting down another fighter edging toward the perimeter wall. Each time she struck the ground team, his rhythm faltered. His muzzle flashes grew more frequent, his shots sharper but less patient, exposing the frustration of a hunter forced to defend. Sweat traced her brow despite the cold. Her heartbeat slowed, matched to the rhythm Ghost had drilled into her. She exhaled, letting the reticle steady, then squeezed. Another insurgent collapsed mid-sprint. For a brief instant, she imagined the Phantom's teeth grinding across the valley. He was adjusting, shifting positions to find a better lane, but each movement revealed a glint, a shadow, a clue. The duel became a dance of predators, each move countered, each decision critical. Maria's fear never left, but she harnessed it, feeding discipline into every breath. The Phantom might have experience, but she had turned the battlefield into his cage. With each fallen insurgent, she tightened it, forcing him into errors he could not afford. The first light of dawn crept over the eastern ridge, pale bands cutting through smoke as if the mountains themselves were drawing breath. Maria pressed her cheek against the scope, sweat trickling down despite the chill. The Phantom had shifted, abandoning his cover to claim higher ground. Now he crouched on a rocky outcrop nearly 1,200 meters away, faint against the brightening skyline. Distance alone should have made the shot impossible. She had one round left in the magazine. Wind tugged at the tower, rattling loose metal, threatening to throw off her aim. She adjusted elevation, lips moving with whispered calculations, Ghost's lessons echoing in memory. 6 minutes up, 2 left for wind. Bullet drop like a fall from a building, almost 40 feet across open air. Her heart slowed, each beat a measured drum, reticle drifting with the rhythm. The Phantom fired first. The crack split the dawn, his round striking sparks from the barrier inches above her head, showering her in dust. Maria did not flinch. She let the moment stretch, waiting for the lull as the gusts eased, the world briefly still. Her finger tightened on the trigger, steady and unhurried. The M24 roared, recoil slamming into her shoulder. She held her breath, eyes locked through the glass as the round began its long journey. For a heartbeat, there was nothing but silence. The valley suspended in stillness, soldiers below frozen in their defenses. The bullet arced across the sky, defying gravity, fighting the crosswind, obeying only the math she had trusted. The phantom's silhouette twitched, a sudden jerk against the horizon. Then he toppled backward, swallowed by the rocks that had sheltered him. The ridge went quiet. No more muzzle flashes. No more invisible hand guiding death across the battlefield. Maria exhaled slowly, lungs empty, body trembling as the weight of the shot settled over her. Around her the base erupted with renewed fire, soldiers surging as insurgents faltered without their guardian. She stayed prone, scope fixed on the ridge, confirming what she already knew. The predator who had haunted them was gone, felled by the bullet they said she would never fire. The smoke still hung over the compound, drifting in lazy curls from the shattered motor pool and the blackened tower. Soldiers gathered in clusters, faces streaked with grime, voices rising in a mixture of relief and awe. They had seen her on the platform, had watched the impossible shot strike true. Sergeant Williams pushed through the crowd, his eyes wide with something like disbelief. "You saved us all," he said, gripping her shoulder. She gave no reply, her expression steady, though inside her pulse still beat with the rhythm of the scope. The moment broke with the sound of boots. Colonel Hayes strode into the courtyard flanked by military police, his uniform untouched by battle, his face cold and severe. He wasted no time, his voice slicing through the murmurs. "Staff Sergeant Maria Santos, you are under arrest for disobeying direct orders, unauthorized use of restricted equipment, and conduct prejudicial to good order." He gestured sharply, and the MPs stepped forward. The soldiers who had cheered fell silent, the weight of authority pressing down on them. Williams moved instinctively. "Sir," with respect. Hayes cut him off with a glare. "One more word, Sergeant, and you'll join her in the brig." He turned back to Maria. "Heroics don't excuse insubordination. The chain of command is not optional." His words rang hollow against the sight of smoldering walls and the knowledge of who had truly saved them. Before the MPs could close in, another voice carried across the courtyard, low but firm. "Before you destroy her career, you might want to hear this." Ghost Patterson stepped from the crowd, gray hair damp with sweat, satellite phone still in his hand. His other hand held a manila folder thick with pages. "I've been on the line with General Morrison. He's very interested in the soldier who ended the Phantom's reign with a single shot at 1,200 meters. A ripple moved through the ranks. Phones appeared in soldiers' hands, cameras raised. Hayes faltered, color draining from his face. Ghost extended the folder, his voice steady. Sworn statements from 12 men and women whose lives were saved tonight. Ballistics reports. And a Silver Star recommendation already signed by Captain Rodriguez. The courtyard filled with murmurs, the clash of silence and noise breaking against Hayes's rigid stance. Maria stood unmoving, eyes calm, while the truth spread faster than orders could suppress. Authority had tried to bury her. Witnesses would not let it. 6 months later, the old ammunition bunker was gone. In its place stood a modern range, glass panels shielding firing lanes, wind sensors blinking along the ridges. The smell of damp concrete had been replaced by the clean bite of steel and oil. Maria adjusted the sling of her custom rifle, the weapon built to her specifications. Its weight balanced perfectly in her hands. The Silver Star pinned to her chest caught the morning light, but she wore it without ceremony. Ghost watched from a step behind, older than she remembered, lines etched deeper into his weathered face. His pale eyes remained unblinking as he lifted binoculars. "Target is at 1,400, he said, voice still gravel, still demanding. Maria settled prone, cheek pressed against the stock. The wind curled across the valley, faint and steady. She ran the math with quiet ease. No hesitation, no whispers this time. Her breath slowed, heartbeat steady. The trigger squeeze was smooth, practiced. The rifle cracked, recoil pressing into her shoulder, the echo rolling across the range. Seconds later, the distant steel erupted into shards. Ghost lowered the binoculars. For the first time, he allowed a thin smile. Outstanding. You're ready. She rose, brushing grit from her sleeve, and turned to see an officer waiting with a manila folder. Inside lay the draft curriculum for a new program, an initiative to train female snipers, designed with her input, carrying her name at the top. The officer held it out with formality. The choice is yours, field or instruction. Maria held the folder in silence, her fingers resting on the edge. She could return to the mountains, to hunt the apprentices of the Phantom, or she could remain here, shaping the future so others would never stand where she once had denied, dismissed, unseen. Behind her, younger soldiers whispered the name that had already spread beyond the base. La Fantasma, the ghost who made the impossible shot. She looked across the range, dawn light spilling over the targets. For the first time, she felt the choice was hers alone. Legacy or battle. Both roads belonged to her. The woman they had once buried beneath a red stamp was now the standard they measured against.